again, it makes me, hi everybody, it's the Tatiana show and I'm ready to kill Josh. He's messing with me. And you guys caught me being all upset. I don't know why he's trying to bust my buttons, because it's February 20th. I was in a perfectly good mood. And you know, when you do one of these shows from home, right, or wherever you are in the world, which admittedly is very difficult, and you're trying to bring together multiple people through the magic of the internet, you know, it doesn't always work perfectly. And there's nothing more frustrating than internet where it's like, can you hear me now? Wait, but and then, so Josh thinks it's hilarious to bust my buttons. I think that sounds way more ladylike than bust my balls.
Yeah, bust my buttons.
Yeah, actually, I'm gonna incorporate. So I've been trying to curse less, and I don't want to say the F word, so I'll say fudge that, and it's got some positive impact because everybody likes fudge. It still has the hardness of the F vowel with the It's very expressive.
Your vocabulary will just grow 1 billion times by cutting out the F word.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I'm just like changing it to one word that I already know. So I don't know if I'm growing the vocab, but either way, it's a lot nicer. How are you doing, Josh? What's going on?
I'm doing good. We have just conferences like mad, going around giving speeches about asset-based money and digital asset-based money and decentralized money and all the good stuff. You know what the difference is between debt-based. You know, all these greedy people are in Bitcoin now. You know, they're all running in. All the greed, all the normie greed is rushing in.
I'm so glad you reminded me. That's so nice of you. You didn't even realize what you just did. So,
and no one gives a hell about the money stuff anymore. So that's why, I give talks about the differences between debt-based and asset-based money. I think it's an important topic.
So I've decided that as the crypto space has grown, and apparently, you know, I'm an OG now, I've decided I'm going to start calling people out. And I never got to do that before because I had no power and I was just a little peon. But now I have a little bit of power. And I'd like to say it's really hard to pick out which conferences to do because there's so many different conferences. And there's a conference that I went to in Poland by this guy, David KUCR, and then it's spelled DAVIDKUSTRA. And basically my clients, they gave money for a sponsorship. They were never listed on the website. They were never given a speaking slot, even though there was a written record of all of that stuff, submitting the logo, all that. And then when I got there, they didn't let me perform. So I think it's incumbent to let people know that when there's scammer type conferences. So, you know, it's my opinion, but cryptocurrencyworldexpo.com, that's the name of the website. They're doing it in Berlin, I think toward the end of March. March 21st.
That's where I live. How can they sabotage my city? No, the thing is that there was a whole conference in London that all these sponsors paid for with money. So it is weird. It's like conference scam. The scamming's gone to a whole new level.
From now on. And I was all excited because, you know, I love Poland and I'm biased for the Polish. I'm pro Poland. And I couldn't support that conference and it was a total waste because I went there for no reason. But anyway, it was still fun. Anyway, that's enough of that. I feel like that was the negativity, but now we're ready for the positivity because we're changing the world with cryptocurrency and all these awesome guests. Today, we've got Micha Benoliel, which is like the worst friend. Hi, Micha. Sorry for my butchering of your beautiful name. Can you say it for me so I can get a little better at my French pronunciation?
Sure. Micha Benoliel.
Micha Benoliel. Yeah, that's nice. Do you like introducing yourself with that? Is it like...
Sure. I can tell a bit about myself, yeah. So I'm a big fan of crypto, decentralized system. My first experience in decentralized system was dates from... back in 2004, when I had a small telco back in France, and no telco wanted to work with Skype at that time, and I was lucky to be the one to open up Skype in and Skype out for Skype. So enabling to landlines and mobile phones. It was a lot of fun.
Wow.
And I was back into this when I arrived in the US back in 2011 and founded a company called Open Garden. And we wanted to build peer-to-peer mesh networks. And what happened is everyone was asking for a messaging app that could work without internet by connecting smartphones to one another. And people who were asking that was for Burning Man.
So Fire chat.
Exactly. So we built FireChat for Burning Man. And what happened is that FireChat got used not only at Burning Man, but during many music festivals and during all these political events. So the biggest one was during the Hong Kong Umbrella Revolution back in September, October 2014, when 500,000 people installed the app to stay connected and organized the Umbrella Revolution. I was just by pure serendipity landing in Hong Kong when it happened. So I spent 10 days in the city of Hong Kong in the middle of the protest. Didn't sleep for 10 days trying to help the students. And it was because we were getting a lot of attack and also a scam on the app itself. So we had to figure out how to sort things out so the app could keep on operating efficiently. And it was amazing. It basically transformed my perception of digital tools and what you can build and how people can use it to stay free, basically, and free to communicate and express themselves, free to organize whatever they want. And I kept that deep in my heart, even if I left Open Garden a bit more than 2 years ago. So the company I founded 7 years ago, and who built FireChat. And I always wanted to build new tools that would basically help freedom of speech and access to information, because my dream as a kid was always to connect everyone to the internet for free. And every of my projects is going in that direction.
It really is. Tatiana, how do you get such top shelf talent to come on your show? It really, I mean, all these projects are things that I've played with over the years. I mean, I remember Open Garden from like 7-8 years ago. I'm not sure when you guys launched, but amazing project, absolutely amazing. And then FireChat, I think was FireChat also used a lot during the Arab Spring? Was that before?
No, it was after, but it was used in some countries in the Middle East also.
Yeah.
So if I wanted to connect to something like that, I would just so I'm not the most technical person in the world. And I think some of our listeners aren't necessarily. So what would a person do when they're regularly linked up to Wi-Fi? They would hit Open Garden. And then, because, what if one person isn't originating with, you know what I mean? Like, are they all just sort of chaining to the internet from one house? Or how is that working? How does that work exactly? How do I get internet in the middle of nowhere?
So we built the FireChat app in a way that you don't need to have any technical knowledge. So it's just like a traditional messaging app. So you use it as if you were using WhatsApp or Messenger. The difference is if you don't have internet access, then your message start to be broadcasted around you from your phone to other phones around you. And you start also to receive messages from these other phones around you if they have FireChat. So you can keep on participating in group chats. And you can keep on sending and receiving messages from people you are communicating on a one-to-one basis. All the messages are encrypted, so when they go onto other people's phone, basically only the receiver is able to read your message. And so it works completely in an offline fashion. So if no one is connected to the internet, you can still have a minimum way of exchanging information with people around you. And when there's someone connecting to the internet first, then that person will release the messages that are supposed to go and reach people on the other side of the planet, for example.
Wow.
So it's
that's how the internet should be. In my mind, that's how the topology of the internet should be. Pure mesh network all the way.
Well, it's a combination of mesh network and what we call also delay tolerant networks, because sometimes you can be in proximity with someone and not necessarily have a direct connections or access to other people. But if your messages can be relayed by that person to the next person or to the internet at some point, you can still have a way to send communications or receive communications.
Why would governments, how can they shut this down? Is it possible? Because obviously sometimes it's beneficial for, somewhere, I don't know, like North Korea. We're going to be talking with Scott Horton later. He's going to be talking about there, can they utilize this there? What happens in regions where it's restricted?
So the fact that the network is a self-healing network and that it works also in proximity when there is no internet makes it very difficult for government to trace the messages, very difficult to shut this kind of network if you have the density, because the requirement is you need enough people with the app around you so you can create a network on the fly and be able to exchange communications.
Right.
In the case of North Korea, I mean, North Korea is a hot topic because they do so much to prevent any form of digital communications. They control the operating system. They control access to the internet. I mean, so it makes it very difficult because people there have devices that have a specific operating system that's basically built by the government that's able to track anything that you do, even if you send or share images or anything, then you have like a tracking number that gets attached to these images to know the source, who share it with whom. I mean, it's a real tool for spying on citizens, what's happening there.
So the encryption wouldn't protect them, but it would on like, a regular Android phone or a Google phone in the United States. I mean, the US has a very highly sophisticated spying apparatus, but would things on this be secure from that, or no? Is it because the operating system from North Korea is already like the infrastructure is so different from the rest of the world that makes it more susceptible to government intervention?
What happens is they record everything that you do on your device. Mm-hmm. So unless you have a device that's free from this operating system, which is possible, and there are probably a few devices there, but not, I guess, not enough, and not. So it's hard to actually have a community. Yeah.
But I mean, it's the beginning of this stuff, right? I mean, people are they're gonna take this and they're gonna learn from it and they're gonna make improvements. And I mean, even if it doesn't help in North Korea, it helps in so many other places. I think it's so cool. I really like it a lot.
Well, absolutely. I think it's every time you have new waves of technologies, it takes some time for people to adapt, to understand. And after people start to build because they understand how it works. I mean, I think it's what's happening today with crypto and the fact that we are democratizing access to cryptographic systems. It's also enabling, I mean, many different applications that we didn't think were possible before. So and I mean, I can tell you one of the projects I'm working now, which basically, because I really like what a messaging app can enable. And so I'm working with a team of fantastic people on a project called Sky Blue Network. And we are building a fully decentralized messaging app, but the goal is to tie messaging and micropayments, because we believe that when you have freedom of communications linked to freedom of payment, then you can enable fantastic things and things which are could seem very basic, but are very important according to me. So when you build first a system in a decentralized manner, and I'm not talking about peer-to-peer mesh of the grid communications, I'm just talking purely when you are connected to the internet. If you build things in a fully decentralized manner, then you can still have chat rooms operating, even if government wants to shut down access to these chat rooms. For example, I don't know if you followed probably Joshua, you saw what happened during the revolution at the beginning of the year in Iran with Telegram. But basically, Telegram shut down chat rooms, and after the government shut down Telegram, if a messaging app had a decentralized capabilities within it, basically that wouldn't be possible today. So we need a tool like that enables that.
Yes.
And if you tie this kind of tools to sending a message or sending payment as easy as sending a message, you can enable, fantastic things for people around the globe. You can start to connect and help people who are normally unbanked. You can have a student basically building a chat room to collect money for his tuition, all doing that using a smart contract. So it enables possibilities of collecting and moving money in a new fashion. So that's what we are building with Sky Blue now.
That's really cool, Micha.
Yeah, I'm digging all of this. So how come, this is somewhat, it seems to the normal person, it's a great idea. This is so awesome. I feel like governments would think of this as something subversive, even though the platform itself is decentralized. Don't people who are working on this stuff, especially in the public way, they know, with a really overreaching tyrannical government, if they start really going off the rails, isn't that something that developers get in trouble for, or could? If we started going really the wrong direction, is that something that you're concerned about? And overall, are people that are trying to build these kinds of things, for example, Cody Wilson in the US, he made the Ghost Gunner. He's getting in trouble for that. Do you have concerns about that type of thing?
I think you are right. I don't have concerns because I think what we are building and what we are trying to do is mainly to do good. So I think as long as you want to do good and you remain aligned with your vision, then you shouldn't be worried about anything you do. You just should make it happen and make everything possible to make it happen. And then I think, and then I think there's something bigger which is happening because with technologies of decentralization is, I mean, look at the success of Bitcoin. I mean, Bitcoin is a system that's fully independent and autonomous, and what we want to build with Sky Blue is really something that also becomes completely independent and autonomous. So at some point, it's basically nodes and servers could be operated by people who just want to participate into the network, and the founders or the developers who work to the product don't need to actually hold the key. At some point, when the network reaches a certain point, you can just basically leave it have a life of its own. And Bitcoin has like something like 11,000 people contributing to the nodes, and some of them not to make money, just because they want
believe.
They believe.
So how is this like, you know, something like IRC or some of these really base level messaging protocols? How is that different? And second question, do you still need to go through standard ISPs, or is it incorporating some of the features of FireChat of being ISP independent, but then having these nodes that plug to the actual internet?
So it's a very different architecture from what we did at FireChat. It's really enable nodes on the internet. We're not talking about offline off-grid communications. It's really some on the internet.
Yeah.
The difference.
Fully encrypted.
Yeah, exactly. The difference is when you have a lot of nodes that are decentralized, and ultimately we would like to push the architecture at the edge, so on the people's smartphones, and that's going to take time. Then it becomes very difficult to actually control or figure out what's happening, because everyone with a smartphone at some point will be a node, a server, and a client, and will be able to host conversations for others, but also communicate. So so you are dependent on ISPs for the last mile, because you still need an access to the internet.
And with the chat function being tied to micropayments, you know, the original notion behind Adam Back's Hashcash was to stop spam. Is that also something that you're thinking about, is the ability to maybe charge to receive or some sort of stamping cost, even if it's micro, to put some sort of cost to spam? Because it just drives me insane, spam.
Well, it's a good question. Many of the projects who are actually trying to do messaging are introducing that notion where it is linked to a micropayment. I believe if it's not perceived by the user, then it could make sense. But you want your messaging app to gain the maximum adoption, to be as easy to use as any other messaging app. Otherwise, there's no chance that this is going to scale. And so user experience is key when you build these things. It's a very competitive sector. I mean, if you look at all the messaging platforms, so you need to build something that doesn't make it more difficult to use. Otherwise...
and it's extremely sticky. Like, messaging apps, once people have got their network of friends, and geez, I don't know about you, Tatiana, but how many messages apps have you got? Like, I've got,
I'm
Telegram.
So sick of them all. I have literally 8 applications open, and my peer people are like, you can't have all those apps open. I'm like, what do you want me to do? The real drag.
But how do you find, like, what's your approach to enabling people to jump away from that network, or trying to incentivize getting people to grab their network from one place like Telegram and move it across to something like Sky Blue?
So if I have the answer and I was sure of it, I would tell you. It's a tough thing to make happen. I think we will have to go through many iterations. We have some good ideas on how to make that happen, but I think we'll go through a process of iterations, and we will see what sticks, basically.
Awesome. Tatiana, are you ready to ditch all your apps and jump into Sky Blue?
I like all this stuff. Can I get this on can I do any of this stuff on my iPhone?
You will be able to do it on your iPhone, yes, definitely.
How soon? I don't want to wait. Well, I'm ready now.
we are just starting the project, so it's going to take at least 4 to 6 months, I guess, before you see something. Yeah.
So are you ICOing? How's this thing funded?
Good question.
It's a good question. Well, we try to build things with a certain certainty. So today, the world of ICO is a bit, I think, in a transition. So we are waiting to see how these things basically settle.
Yeah, man. We're the same here at Voltura. It's like we don't want to be put in that same group of scammy ICOs. So we're like, we'll hold off for a bit.
Exactly. So we mainly look at people who believe in what we want to build and share the same vision. So that's what we are doing.
But I mean, saying that, I think ICOs where big names like yourselves who've got a track record of building cool shit, people are ready to jump on board and because you've delivered. I mean, I went through the Techstars thing, and one of the things I remember from them was, look, what's the difference between a con artist and an entrepreneur? They've both got stories, they've both got nothing. The actual difference is that one's got the actual will to pull through with the thing, and the other, the scammer doesn't. And so so it's backing someone who's already built amazing stuff like yourself is a no-brainer.
Yeah, I mean, I am passionate by what I build, and I find people. I'm lucky to have people around working with me who share the same passion, and also lucky to meet people who want to invest in this project. So that's pretty cool. And but to come back on the ICOs, I give you another project I'm working on, which is much more advanced, called Nodle, NODLE.io, which is basically we leverage smartphones what I call the smartphone infrastructure, what we did in the past with FireChat, and we built that crowdsourced network to lower the cost of connectivity, so manufacturers can connect their device at a very, very low cost to the internet. So it's going to be a global network, and people will be able to connect objects for a few cents a month to the internet. And we looked a lot into actually introducing a blockchain and building a fully decentralized infrastructure again here. Mm. And I mean, we are facing problems of scalability that I'm sure we are not the only one to face today when it comes to implementing for real a use of the blockchain technology.
Yeah. Have you looked at Skycoin? Because it's Sky Blue, so Skycoin's also looking at hardware. Like I think it was a very early Bitcoin adopter. He's looking at decentralized DNS using hardware modules as miners to like proof of bandwidth or something. He's got some proof of work, which is really interesting.
So I was just connected with one of the founders. Last week, and but we have to continue our conversation. So. Right. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, awesome. Wow, that's Tatiana, like I said, amazing guests.
I feel inspired. We should have had him go after Scott, because I think that Scott's really going to bring us down a little bit. But it sort of brings home the reason why we need the kinds of innovations that Micha and his team and all these other super smart I don't know, I guess freedom fighters. I don't know what else to call people. Sometimes when I was younger, now tech is very new to me. And before, you think tech, oh, it's so weird, I don't like it. But these are the real freedom fighters in the world. So I think that's really rock and roll. Thank you, Micha, very much for joining us. Right before we let you jump off, where should people connect with you? What's the best way for them to find you?
Well, I have a Twitter account, which is my username is Antenor, ANTHENOR. So that's a good way to connect with me. Or if they want, also my email is Micha, MICHA at skyblue with no e.network.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for making the time to join us today. And we hope to find out more when things launch, and we'll be sure to kind of be retweeting and sharing your latest progress. So thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Tatiana.
Thank you. Bye now.
Take care. Bye.
Thanks, Micha. Ciao.
Bye.
That was really good, Josh.
Wow, there you go.
Yeah, I like that. I feel inspired. Like the world is going to do something positive, and it's not all bad. Really quick before we bring on. Sorry. Go ahead.
I just was going to say, this is what I love about the crypto world. Years ago, like you said with technology, years ago, you'd hear all the problems. Like you'd hear, I don't know, everyone in Libertarian say this and corruption, and you're just going insane with all these problems of the world. And, you know, what I really love about technologists, especially in the crypto scene, where they come from that anarchist libertarian sort of, there's some seeds in a lot of that. They really come out with technology that solves some of these problems. And it's just such a sigh of relief, isn't it?
Yeah, there's not a lot of depressed people here. And I think it's because we have, you know, a distinct sense of purpose. Before we go on to our next guest, I'm super excited to have Scott Horton on. I just want to give a shout out to some of our sponsors. Oh gosh, I was like, thebitcoincpa.com. Talk to Kirk Phillips.
What a guy.
Tax season is upon you. Don't leave it till the last minute. He has been making things clean in my books for quite a while now. We're almost done. It's going to be glorious.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, if you use Coinbase, you know, they've been, you know, they're getting hammered by the IRS. Go see Scott. It's really important, isn't it?
What do you mean, Scott? Scott's with us. You said Kirk. You meant Kirk. Sorry, anyway, and then also, guys, make sure you check out Crypto Compare. Those guys are neat. You can get all your crypto information and stuff. So, yeah, I don't know. Let's move it on along, because I want to, you know, we got a lot of guests today. We got a lot of material to get through. So, Scott, my friend, my fellow warrior, what awesomeness have you been up to lately in the fight against the endless war machine? Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks. Oh, same old thing. I just interview people who write good stuff, mostly.
So give us the, we'll jump right in then. Well, hold on. Okay, Scott, tell people, what do you do? You've got an anti-war radio thing. You've got it on multiple channels. You're in Austin. You've got Fool's Errand, your book. So really quick, before we dive right into the latest news and what you think is important for people to get familiar with, a little quick background on what the stuff that is that you're working on.
Sure. Well, okay. So my website is scotthorton.org. So I have, that's the archives of my different shows going back. I'm on KPFK in Los Angeles on Sunday mornings, and then I just interview people all week long for the podcast. I'm the opinion editor of Antiwar.com, which means I choose all the viewpoints at Antiwar.com. And then, yeah, I wrote a book, as you said, Fool's Errand, Time to End the War in Afghanistan, which everybody seems to really like to spend $20 on. So
I'm glad that that's working out. I also have a signed copy here at home. I haven't had a chance to read it, but I look forward to eventually having time to do anything at all. And the nice thing about having my own podcast is I get to bring you on and talk to you about things firsthand. But the last time that we were here, we talked a lot about the situation in the Middle East. Now we've got all this stuff going on with Korea. And I always feel like there's some sort of boogeyman waiting underneath the blanket or whatever, the bed, lurking and hoping to have another invasion somewhere else. So what do we need to be thinking about right now if we want to be educated citizens that are passionate about ending worldwide aggression?
Well, so on the Korea thing, I mean, the thing to keep in mind is, because it's a crappy communist country, it's one of the poorest countries in the world. And America, of course, is the richest and most powerful country in the world. So anyone who says that, oh, they threaten us in any kind of existential fashion, I mean, obviously, they're just fooling you. Although the thing of it is, at this point now, they do have intercontinental ballistic missiles, and they do have nuclear weapons. Now, whether they have nuclear weapons that are small enough to put on an intercontinental ballistic missile is still anyone's guess. But at this point, they have, you know, basically achieved the ability to defend themselves ultimately by threatening American cities in retaliation. Whereas before, war with them has really always been off the table anyway, because war with them would mean that they could just decimate Seoul, and hundreds of thousands or possibly even millions of South Koreans would be killed, even in a short war. Basically, they have so many rockets and artillery right on the DMZ, and Seoul, the capital of South Korea, and the greater metropolitan area, there's millions of people right there within artillery range. So, you know, already it would be a you know, just a regular conventional war on the peninsula. There would be an absolute horror show. As our current Secretary of Defense, James Mattis, has said, it would be the worst fighting of our lifetimes. So he's, you know, at least including Vietnam. Maybe he means the previous Korean War. I doubt he's really referring to World War II there, but he's basically saying this would be the worst war in the post-World War II era that we'd face.
Yeah, and China would step in as well, which would make it horrendous. I'd like to step back a bit, because a lot of people talk about Korea and look at them, look how freaky they are. There's no one in the streets. There's hardly any shot. And they kind of, you know, they really make it look weird. in the Western media. Now, I would like to just find out why that is. Why are they so intense and strange over there? Where did it start? How did the wars of the past, and how many people died in those wars, and what sort of psychological damage was put onto those people to become what they are now? I mean, it's kind of weird over there.
Well, I mean, there's a lot to that. I mean, first of all, it is a brutal family dictatorship. You know, it was the grandfather, then the father, and now the grandson. And it's a totalitarian country. It's not even just an authoritarian country. It's absolute rule by the state there, and absolute property ownership of everything and all that. Or, well, I don't know, absolute, but only within whatever limits they've decided. You know, there's nothing like liberty anywhere, you know, in North Korea at all. And yet, you know, it's so to go back to the history of that, if you want to, you know, talk about how much of that is America's fault, well, you know, Truman started a war there, Truman and Syngman Rhee. And, you know, the official history says that the North Koreans started it, but that's really not true. And there's a great article called Who Really Started the Korean War by Justin Raimondo, where he shows that the American-backed Southern regime, which were basically the Vichy puppets of the Japanese during the Japanese occupation during World War II, that the Americans inherited them and backed them up. And then they were doing cross-border provocation attacks in order to get the North to respond. And then once they did, they pretended that that was aggression. And they launched a United Nations war there, you know, the Korean War under Harry Truman. It was the first war, at least anything like that size, where they didn't declare war. Harry Truman said that the UN Charter overrode Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, and that he had all the authority he needed to start a war himself. And then, yeah, the Americans, you know, basically firebombed the entire north of the country to the ground with napalm. They killed, you know, a quarter of the people, a quarter of the population of the country or something.
A quarter of the people? Are you kidding? Wow. Man, that's insane, isn't it?
Approximately 2 or 3 million, I guess, somewhere in there. It's just like Vietnam. And then we've had them under total blockade and, you know, nuclear weapons. We have no peace treaty to end the war. We have still only a ceasefire, no armistice from the end of the Korean War way back then. And we constantly have 35,000, although it fluctuates, but somewhere around there, 35,000 troops in the country to, you know, to serve as a tripwire in any conflict, so that it would immediately become America's war. And unlike any other place in the world, if there is a war between North Korea and South Korea, the entire South Korean army, according to the deal, is under the command of U.S. forces. They cede their entire army to us. Now, as Doug Bandow points out constantly, the South Korean economy, because it is a capitalist economy and not a libertarian one, but a right-wing one, they have, I don't even know, maybe I forget the numbers, but it's probably 25 times the economy of the North, or better than that. And they have a much stronger military. And here the South Koreans are screwing around trying to build a blue water navy because they can afford to build a navy to go sailing around because the Americans are picking up their dime and picking up their defense costs. And of course, then we create that moral hazard, which, you know, right now it's not playing out this way, but we do create a moral hazard where the South Koreans can afford to be much tougher than they really are because the Americans have their back. And so the Trump administration's policy is that we won't talk to you until you agree to give up everything first. And this is, of course, you know, the offer that cannot possibly be accepted. And it's made to be that way. And I don't really know what they think they're doing. I mean, as you pointed out, China is right there. Well, Russia is too. I mean, North Korea is basically between China and Russia right there. Yeah. So, you know, at all costs, this thing should be resolved diplomatically. But, you know, it was more than anything, it was George W. Bush and his government that created this crisis. Because when the old man died, when the grandfather died in 1994, and Kim Jong-il started threatening to withdraw from the Non-Proliferation Treaty, Bill Clinton cut a deal with him. And we'll give you some welfare. We'll give you some light water reactors, which means that the waste product is not useful for nuclear weapons, like a heavy water reactor is, waste is. And we'll give you some fuel oil, and you agree to stay within the Non-Proliferation Treaty and your safeguards agreement with the IAEA and don't make nuclear bombs. And that was working. And in fact, the Americans never lived up to their end of the deal. They gave them a little bit of money and a little bit of fuel oil, I think, once. And then Newt Gingrich and the Republicans in Congress stopped Bill Clinton's even ability to live up to his end of the agreement. And yet they still stayed within theirs, even though we never gave them the light water reactors. I think Donald Rumsfeld's company still got the money for the contract to build the light water reactors, but they never did it. And then when Bush Jr. came in, they, immediately started picking a fight with North Korea. And Gareth Porter just has this great article that just came out on Truthdig about a month ago. It's called How Cheney and His Allies Created the North Korean Nuclear Crisis, something like that. And he just goes through and he shows step by step by step everything they did, including announcing they were withdrawing from the agreed framework, putting new sanctions on the North Koreans, declaring the right to seize their ships on the high seas, and basically calling them an outlaw state, putting them on the axis of evil. And then also when they put out their nuclear posture review, they had the North Koreans listed as a country that was on the list for possible nuclear first strike. And only then did the North Koreans finally withdraw, Kim Jong-il, withdraw from the non-proliferation treaty, kick the IAEA inspectors out of his country, restart his heavy water reactor that the Soviet Union had built for him, and begin harvesting that plutonium to make nuclear weapons. So it's all George Bush's fault. I mean, the much shorter version of that is How Bush Pushed North Korea to Nukes by Gordon Prather at antiwar.com. But the best version is Gareth Porter at truthout.org, How Cheney and His Allies. And the motive is they would rather have a rogue state with nukes and missiles that they can use as a foil to sell missile defense, boondoggle, welfare for military industrial complex firms, when all they really have to do is just send Dennis Rodman over there and just make friends. All they have to do is just promise not to invade. We have a security guarantee to Cuba, right? John F. Kennedy promised we'll never invade Cuba. No matter how long Castro lives, we won't invade. And that's the deal. That's all we have to do for the North Koreans. Right now, they have even said, we will never negotiate the nuclear issue until the Americans stop threatening and practicing invading our country twice a year the way you do. So in other words, and I'm not saying take them at their word, but what they're saying there at least is that they're willing to negotiate even the nuclear issue if we would stop practicing invading their country, if our country would deal with them in good faith. And of course, Barack Obama, I don't mean to let him off the hook. He's, did absolutely nothing to help resolve this crisis the whole time and continued to threaten them. When Donald Trump says, oh, I'll completely obliterate North Korea if they ever do anything, Obama used the exact same kind of language and helped, ratchet the crisis up this much worse. So now we're at the point here in the future in 2018 where now conceivably they could deliver an A bomb, probably not an H bomb, but at least an atom bomb to New York or DC. And so now you would think they would say, okay, well, you got us. Now let's negotiate, but they still won't. They still say negotiation means you completely capitulate and then we'll meet you at the table.
But how much of that is propaganda? I mean, how much is that truth? How can we determine that as truth? I'm always so skeptical when you hear that they have nukes ready to go.
Oh, I think if you ask the experts, they'll say that nobody really knows how deliverable their nukes are. I mean, The thing is about making a nuke that you can fit on a missile is you've got to, quote, miniaturize it in order to get it to work. And so it may well be that they could deliver an H-bomb in a civilian airliner if they had one of those, or on the back of a flatbed truck if they could just drive across to Seoul. It may not be the case that they can deliver a nuke to North America. I mean, that's a very good point. But I think, the warmongers might gloss over it, but the experts will tell you they just don't know. Nobody really knows. Their first 3 nuclear tests were fizzles. And then after that, meaning like partial explosions, but not real successes. But then they've had, I think, 3 more tests after that they buried so deeply underground that the intelligence on them is just not clear at all of whether they were, they've claimed that they set off a hydrogen bomb, a fusion bomb, although some, it's doubtful, but nobody really knows. It could have been a boosted atom bomb.
Yeah, it can also be all show pony stuff, like, oh, look how dangerous we are.
It is 1940s technology, ultimately, to create that critical mass and set off that chain reaction. So it is doable. Yeah.
Well, you're right. And North Korea, it really does seem, I get that sort of 1940s vibe from them in terms of technological advancement. But who knows? Maybe they're getting stuff from China who are absolutely on the cutting edge.
Yeah. Hey, can I talk about the Olympics real quick?
Sure.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what's up with everybody being all gracious toward this lady and thinking she's just this wonderful princess? I mean, aren't they running gulags there? So
yeah, I mean, what happens is that the TV airheads know nothing, right? So then, you know, they're perfectly happy to completely demonize North Korea all day, right? But then they see an actual North Korean, and wowee, she looks just like a human, like in my neighborhood or something. And so then they're completely blown away. Wow, she's even pretty and has a little bit of style or whatever. And so then now all of a sudden, it's like we're on an episode of, you know, whatever crap people watch. I don't know. The one where they get married or
TMZ or whatever.
Yeah, it's all now we're talking about the most surface level thing. So then the right-wing reaction is, don't you know she's a monster? And then everyone who's not either a North Korea loving red, although even reds I don't think necessarily love North Korea, but everybody who's not a CNN, you know, brainless hairdo says, oh my God, how can you talk about the North Koreans as though they're not demons? When the whole point is, it's a communist dictatorship. Yeah, that's why we should be engaging with them. That's why we should be flattering the sister of the dictator. That's why we should be sending all of our people over there. It doesn't mean ignore what's wrong with the country. That's saying, well, what are you going to do? It's been a communist dictatorship for now 25 years after the fall of the Soviet Union, 40 years since the Chinese gave up communism. I mean, they still have a Communist Party dictatorship, but frankly, it's a fascist country. It's a very, you know, authoritarian capitalist country, China now. There's still a communist dictatorship in North Korea. And
it's weird, isn't it? Why don't they let go? I mean, the sons and the family come back. How can you be a brother of someone like in the family, within the family, and come back and say, like, wouldn't you think, guys, can we just loosen up a little bit? What? I mean,
look, people say about Richard Nixon that he was the worst son of a bitch ever to be the president of the United States, and he opened up China. Because he went over there and he shook hands with Mao Zedong, who was literally, I mean, if we're going by numbers, the worst person who ever lived, who inflicted a famine on his own country that killed 40 million people. Okay. He was as bad as Stalin plus. And Nixon did the right thing by going over there, shaking hands and saying, let's have an open relationship, open up trade, open up.
Hey guys, I think that Scott is on mute. Josh, are you there?
Yeah. I was just.
So we had a silent moment. I actually think I may have done that. Scott, if you could just hit unmute. Sorry, I was looking forward to that. Continue.
Yeah,
now
so
we can hear you.
Yeah. 40 million people.
The best thing that ever happened to China was the Americans making friends with them and encouraging, sending Milton Friedman over there and encouraging them to figure out and understand why markets work. You need prices to figure out how to distribute goods and services. Your commissars don't know what to do. Prices will tell you the clues that you need to know to have a civilization here. And it worked. It saved them. So right now, you know, there was a clip when Dennis Rodman went to North Korea and was palling around with Kim Jong-un. And he came back, and on one of these talk shows, they said, oh my God, Kim Jong-un has prison camps with hundreds of thousands of people in them, with 200,000 people in them. And Dennis Rodman says, America has prisons with 2 million people in them.
Yeah.
So what is your point? The American government has murdered 2 million people in the last 15 years or gotten them killed. Probably, you know, literally killed a quarter of those. But North Korea is the tyranny?
Yeah.
You know, it's completely ridiculous to say that somehow. Look at what happened in 2003. Iraq. which America had blockaded and bombed for 12 years straight. They hadn't, as Ron Paul said, they hadn't shot down a single one of our planes when our planes were flying combat sorties over their country for a dozen years running. They hadn't been able to shoot down a single one of our planes. They had no weapons, no army. They were decimated. Saddam Hussein controlled Baghdad, Fallujah, Tikrit, maybe Mosul. He didn't control Iraqi Kurdistan. He didn't even really have all the way control down in Basra in the south of the country. And George Bush and Dick Cheney said, you know what about Saddam Hussein, though, is he's so evil that means we can't talk to him. Right? Yeah, like, pretend it was true Saddam was holding some mustard gas. We can't negotiate with him about that. Yeah. Suppose it's true that Saddam had, given some money to Osama bin Laden. None of these things are true. But pretend it was true. Then what? We can't negotiate about that? We have to have a war? We have to invade Iraq? And the answer was, well, because you see, like David Koresh, the guy's so damn insane. And so you can't talk to him, even though here's footage of Donald Rumsfeld himself literally shaking hands with the guy, making a deal to provide him with chemical weapons back in the 1980s, in 1983. Never even mind that.
David Koresh and even all these
so evil, we just can't negotiate. There's nothing to talk about because they're so evil and he's so crazy. And the fact of the matter is, the more crazy and the more evil Kim Jong-un is, the more we ought to send Dennis Rodman and the Harlem Globetrotters and the Symphony Orchestra and Pepsi and whatever non-governmental, anything, any part of our society positive that we can send to go over there to trade, to open up relations, to be friends. That's all to the good.
I totally agree.
All that knee-jerk demonization. Yeah, of course it's a hellhole country. Yeah. Right? Yeah. A lot of places are hellhole countries. But is it believable, thinking back to 2002 and 2003, is it believable that poor America was just helpless when it came to Iraq? We just had no other options but to invade that country. I mean, isn't that obviously crazy? And how did they do it? They did it by just saying, oh, Saddam's so evil, which was true. He was an absolute brutal dictator. But that didn't mean that we had to overthrow him. That didn't mean that all of the horrible things about him weren't negotiable. And in fact, we know now on the record that they were. That he had offered to negotiate on every single thing.
All over the world, but they aren't in control of oil and another bunch of resources.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
There's plenty of dictators around the world that are just not in control of large resources, so they don't get taken out, I guess.
Yeah, well, that was a big part of it. Was and in fact, they talk about the power of rising China now that we're all supposed to be so afraid of. But look at where America blew our entire wad, trying to control the oil resources in Mesopotamia to keep them out of China's hands. So that in the event of a war with China, we'd be able to turn off their oil resources. Well, we wasted far more of our wealth and position, even from the empire's point of view here. The Americans wasted far more of their wealth and power and position in the world by trying to dominate Iraq than if they had stayed the hell out. And they wouldn't have any trouble shutting off the Persian Gulf anyway. You don't need a single soldier. All you need is the Navy for that anyway, Assuming the propriety of such a thing, but I'm just saying.
So what do you let me ask something. So, I mean, these steps seem so obvious to regular sane people. And yet for years and years and years and years, the war machine just marches on unfettered. What is the best course of action that we can do? Is that public pushback really our best weapon? Is there anything else that we can do to maybe make our government stop being psycho and killing everybody?
Yeah, I don't really know. I mean, honestly, it's the best racket that anybody ever came up with. And the American taxpayer, and for that matter, the Federal Reserve System and the ability of Congress to go into debt, trillions of dollars the way that they do, it's the best racket ever. If you invest just a few $1 million to bribe a congressman, to bribe a Navy officer, to even just to not even really bribe them illegally, but just take them out for steak dinners and make a nice impression, you can get billions of dollars for your company in return for that. And so, the way the game is played, I don't know how to undo it. I think the only way to undo it would be for the now generation of combat veterans who have gone to Iraq and Afghanistan, et cetera, to come home and really create groups of preferably right-leaning combat veterans saying, we hate the war, we don't believe in the war anymore, and we're mad as hell that the civilians and the officers continue to sacrifice enlisted lives on what we know is a mission that cannot be accomplished. And to really attack the right from the right from a pro-American point of view, from, as David Hackworth used to do, always protecting, in the name of protecting the enlisted man from his officers and from these, you know, think tank idiots who would lie them into war and push them into these ridiculous policies for their, you know, ideological doctrines and their loyalties to their foreign powers, etc.
What do you think the biggest con is around North Korea? What do you think the biggest lie is that we're being told to push us towards war? That we can, be exposed.
Yeah, that evil amounts to irrationality. In fact, this is exact quotes. You know, it could come straight from Dick Cheney, but it's Rex Tillerson and Donald Trump. In his State of the Union address, Donald Trump said, "Look, all you need to know about North Korea's goals in the world, or, you know, what their foreign policy is or what they intend, is just to look at their domestic policy and look at just how evil they are at home." But that just doesn't follow at all. I mean, in fact, how evil they are at home is what limits their ability to project power anywhere, right? You know, their entire gross domestic product is nothing, right? It's less than half of Alabama or something. It's nothing. And so, you know, it's a lie, right? That was your question, right? It's absolutely false. It's absolutely false that, you know, this guy's about to, you know, suicide bomb his whole country so he can get 72 virgins in heaven or some kind of thing. The same lie that they tell about terrorists. You know, this guy, and it's a cliche. Everybody many critics keep saying it, like Doug Bandow and others. This guy clearly wants to die of old age, the way his grandfather and his father did. He wants to be a dictator. He wants to live just like Saddam Hussein, right? Just like the Ayatollahs in Iran. They all want to live to a ripe old age. They don't want to start a war. Anytime somebody's telling you that the leaders of a foreign country are so irrational and so evil that we can't talk to them, it's because the Americans talking to you are in on a premeditated murder plot to start an aggressive war, which is what they always do. And I always bring up David Koresh because it's exactly what they did to David Koresh. They said he's too irrational, so there's no point in talking to him. He's bad to his own people, and we just can't allow that to continue. And he has illegal weapons, which means he's a threat to his neighbors. Now you're supposed to believe that the Branch Davidians are going to march on downtown Waco and seize the courthouse or something, right? And so we have no choice but to send in the Delta Force and kill him. And that's the exact same thing they did to Saddam Hussein in 2003. He's bad to his own people. He's got illegal weapons, and he's too irrational, too evil to deal with. And so we only have one choice: aggressive war. And, you know, I'm sorry, there's just not. If you want to criticize Ayman al-Zawahiri, I guess, along those lines, that he would get, you know, all of his own people killed in order to drag us down, I guess that makes sense. But Korea, Iran, Iraq, Hezbollah, or any of these, they've betrayed no interest whatsoever in dying in order just to bloody our nose on the way down. It's just completely ridiculous.
I mean, sorry, Tatiana.
Well, no, I mean, I think that humanization is really something that is missing from, I don't even know. I don't even think people really think about it anymore. They just think, oh, there's nuclear war coming. What's on TV? But if you think about it, I don't know. I was pretty annoyed with everybody gushing all over that Korean lady. But I don't know. I mean, I think seeing these people and trying to extend the olive branch and trying to approach it from a little bit of a different perspective, I think is very helpful.
It's diplomacy, right? So feelings don't matter. When the Turks shot down that Russian jet a couple of years ago, hell, when the Americans bombed those Russian contractors in Syria, should they have gone rah and wanted to fight about it, or should they have smiled and said, well, you know, accidents happen? Right now, personal feelings aside, we want to ratchet up tensions with Russia in terms of actual combat on the ground in Syria, or maybe everybody should just cool out a little bit, starting with what we say to each other. So,
do you think that Trump is that, like, he seems pretty warmongerish? I mean, he's not really doing anything, but I don't know. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, no, he's horrible on everything. You know, the one
Tell
thing
us how you really feel.
He was reluctant to stay in Afghanistan, but they rolled right over him on that. He's horrible on Iran. I don't know if he really would get us into a war with Iran, but he might. You know, we'll see what happens with the perfectly good nuclear deal. It's a great deal. I don't care what he says. But yeah, he could turn that into a real conflict. He's staying in Syria, which, you know, as I said, just got us into actual firefight with Russians on the ground there last week, and puts us at odds with our NATO allies, the Turks, and all of this, and all to fight to limit Iranian influence and Hezbollah influence, even though they never really did anything to us. You know, people, when they demonize Iran, they have to, one, either just lie about their nuclear weapons, or two, they'll cite the Beirut bombing, the barracks bombing of 1983, which, you know what, Iran was at least backed the group that did that, the Amal militia, and maybe the orders even came from the old dead Ayatollah. But seriously, you got to go back to 1983, and then the rest of what they have is just lies, right? The Argentina, the Jewish Community Center bombing of 1994, that was right-wing Jew-hating Nazis inside the Argentine police that did that. That wasn't Hezbollah that did that. You know, the fact that they got to reach back to, you know, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, and cite examples of things that aren't even real in order to try to pretend that the Shia are the American people's enemies here, when it was Al-Qaeda that knocked our towers down. And now they're mad at Iran because Iran inherited half of Iraq after America's war there in 2003 through 10. Well, tough. You know, they shouldn't have launched an aggressive war based on lies then.
Well, you know, it's a big topic, and geez, I'd love to continue, because I mean, as depressing it is, I think it's super important to go to expose some of these lies, and to be able to say to people, hey, step back a bit. Like, exactly what you said. It's rational. It's irrational to think that these people are just gonna want to blow themselves up. You know, generally people in power, people that live pretty well, they don't want to. But yeah.
Anyway, so sorry guys, I know we're kind of in the thick of it, but we've got to wrap it up because we've got Kitty coming up. But in the meantime, Scott, thank you so much for joining us. So we'd love to have you back on another time. Where can people catch up with you? I know that some of this information is a little overwhelming. I just wanted to bring it up. Guys, if what Scott's saying, you don't understand everything, if you keep listening to his show, you eventually will sort of catch on. I know it's a little bit hard to keep up with all the different places where we're, you know, sending troops, but he'll help you keep track of things. And thank you for all your hard work. Scott, where can people catch up with you?
Cool. Well, thanks very much, Tatiana, for having me, all of y'all. And yeah, so I'm at antiwar.com, the Libertarian Institute. That's me and Sheldon Richmond and Jared LaBelle run the Libertarian Institute at libertarianinstitute.org. I wrote a book called Fool's Errand. I'm constantly complaining all day long on Twitter at Scott Horton Show. Oh, and actually, I just got the full interview archive finally posted, all up on YouTube. 4,600 something interviews there, going back to 2003 at YouTube.com/Scott Horton Show.
Wow, awesome. Well, that sounds like quite the resource. So thank you again. And
oh, and the audiobook of Fool's Errand, which is read by me, is coming out any minute now or any day now.
Oh, that's good. Okay. That's going to be neat.
Where's that? Amazon?
Well, it's on Amazon and Audible and iTunes and all that when it comes out, but you can just go to foolserrand.us and that'll have all the info for you.
Very cool. All right, I'm going to your Twitter right now, and I'm going to retweet your Fool's Errand book so people can sort of look on my Queen Tatiana Twitter feed, and they'll be able to see it there.
Cool.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me. I'll let you go. I know I'm over time here.
No, it was a good / disturbingly miserable time. Thank you for joining us.
All right, thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Awesome. Thank you. Great. So we're going to jump right in here.